Good evening, and welcome to this week's edition of The Message. I'm your host, Donatus King. We'll spend this next hour with one purpose in mind, and that one purpose is to deliver the message that God is Almighty. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be, was made by God. Everything that ever was, is now, ever will be, is a piece of God. Everything that ever happened, is happening right now, or ever will happen, was made to happen by God. God has a master plan for all time and all creation. God is Almighty. The message is brought to you by, is produced by the Society of Knowledge Incorporated. The Society is an interdenominational, religious, spiritual organization. Our members come from various different religious and spiritual backgrounds. We have various different religious and spiritual beliefs. Although we come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs, there's one belief that we share. There's one piece of knowledge that we hold in common. And that's the knowledge that there is a being, by no matter what name we may have been taught to call that being, by no matter what name we may have come to know that being, whether that name be God, Allah, Yahweh, Jesus, Jehovah, Buddha, nature, by no matter what name, we know that there is a being that possesses not some of the power, not most of the power, but all of the power. We know that there is indeed an almighty being. That's the reason we do this show, and the only reason we do this show, to deliver the message that that being that personally I call God, that being is indeed almighty. Today is October the 17th, 2019, and I remind that fact because tonight, as we are on most Thursdays, we are live. And I remind you of that fact because this show is an open discussion. It's a two-way conversation. For those of you that are watching on Facebook, I thank you for watching by Facebook, and I invite you to join this discussion by posting your comments on Facebook, and I'll do my best to read them out over the air. Those of you that are watching by TV in the Cox Cable Orleans Channel 76, I invite you to join the discussion by calling in. You see the telephone number that's on your screen. Call in and share your comments, share your knowledge, share your testimonies, and join this discussion. I invite you to join in and share information, something that's going on in your church, your mosque, your synagogue, your temple, your place of worship. Call in, post your comments on Facebook, share that information. I invite you to call in, paste your comments regarding things that are going on in your nonprofit organization. If you want to let folks know what you all are doing, post your comments on Facebook, call in, and I'll share the information over there. More important than what's going on in your place of worship, more important than what's going on in your nonprofit, if God has worked a miracle in your life, and yes, I'm using that word literally, worked a miracle, because the God that I'm here to tell you about is working miracles. That's right, still in the miracle working business, even in the year 2019. So if God has worked a miracle in your life, call in and share your testimony. It may be someone that needs to hear that God is still working miracles, need to hear that God has worked a miracle in your life. It may be some problems that you had with your health, your finances, your relationships, some kind of problem that you had, and nothing was able to solve that problem. But miraculously, unexplainably, God worked a miracle in your life and solved your problem. It may have been some kind of problem that you had that made you just want to say, I don't know what I'm going to do. And God solved your problem. So call in, share your testimony, post your comments on Facebook. We're going to ask, we have our auto script that's up on the camera. I'm just asking if we can get that pulled off. If we can just get that taken off, that'll help us out a little bit as we go along. All right, we have a full show tonight, and just for those of you that are not familiar with our show, and as far as the format, we're going to start off with our announcements, and after our announcements, we will go on to, all right, we have things going good. After our announcements, we'll go to our religious spiritual study. And during that period, I always remind all of us that approve all things, hold fast that which is good, coming out of the first book of Thessalonians, chapter 5, verse 21. After that, after our religious spiritual study, we'll go into and the topic tonight is going to be the Apocrypha. We'll be reading out of the book of Enoch, okay, the Apocrypha, the book of Enoch. After that, let's move on. We'll go into our words of inspiration tonight. That'll be coming out of the book of Exodus, chapter 8, verses 19 through 32. All right, now before we go into our religious spiritual study, our discussion, before we go into that, I just want to take just a few minutes to set it up. And to set it up, I don't know, can we get that auto script pulled off of that? All right. All right, that's no problem. No problem. We can work through it. All right, this is what we wanted to talk about tonight, and we said that we're going to be talking about the canons and the Apocrypha. What we're going to do, and the reason that we want to do that is last week we started reading reading some of the book of Enoch, and not to, the purpose of this segment of the program is to share information, to share knowledge, and it's not to convince anybody of anything or to change anybody's beliefs, but to share knowledge, okay, to share knowledge. And a lot of us, we read the Bible, we read scriptures, we may go to our place of worship, we'll have our pastor, share different information with us. If we're reading out the Bible, if we go to a mosque, masjid, we may be reading out of the Quran, and depending upon our faith, our religious beliefs, what denomination we call ourselves, what religion we belong to, and it's good to go and read these things, and to hear that read to us is good. But some of us like to learn a little bit about what it is that we're reading. And one of the things that we've been talking about on this show, and some knowledge that we've been sharing on this show, is that a lot of the religious books that we read, whether we're of the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, the Islamic faith, whatever faith we belong to, a lot of the religious texts that we read during our worship services, that we rely upon, a lot of those, we try to figure out how they developed. And one of the things that some of us that were brought up in the Christian faith, when we read the Bible, there are some of us that are under the impression that the Bible, when we pick that's great, thank you very much. When we pick the Bible up and we read a book and we see it in a form like this, we just have the impression that, well, this is a book that always was in this form. It was written like this, and it was just delivered like this. So that's some of us that have that opinion. There are some of us that have done a little bit research, and we realize that no, it wasn't one book, that it was at least two books, okay, the Old Testament and the New Testament. Okay? Then there are some of us that have done a little bit more research, and we realize that, it really wasn't just two books. It was more than just the Old Testament and New Testament, that actually there are at least 27 books in the Old Testament and at least 66 in the New Testament, different books written by different people at different times. Then there's some of us that do a little bit more research, and we come to find out and try to figure out, well, when did these books come together? So that's the word that I'm using tonight as far as the canon, the C-A-N-O-N, the canon. And I'm going to read some materials. And I have gotten away on this show. I've tried to get away from being a talking head and just you seeing me on the screen and me reading stuff off and you watching me read. But tonight, I'm going to get back to that because this is more of a scholarly discussion. And as always, I invite you to let your friends know about it. Hit the share button, hit the like button, start a watch party. This is really going to be an education session tonight, even a little bit more so than usual. So before I get into that, but that's what we'll be talking about, the canon. How did these books come together? Okay, who decided that these were going to be the official books of the Bible, the official books of the Hebrew Bible, the official books of the Christian Bible? Who made that decision? Why did it make those decisions? And then we're going to talk about some of the books that didn't make the cut, that were not selected to be part of the official Bible. Okay, so that's what we'll be talking about tonight. So, but before we get to that, let's go on, do our announcements. And after our announcements, we will get to our religious, spiritual studies section. All right. Our words of inspiration tonight will come out of the book of Exodus, chapter 8, verses 19 to 32. Our announcements, as you see on the screen, that's www.godisalmighty.org. That's our main website. I invite you to log that into your web browser, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can visit that website, and there are links to all of our social media platforms. We have a blog page, a Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can go to our main website, and there are links. You don't have to copy all those different platforms down. Just go to our main website, and there are links. You can just click a button, and it'll take you to those various links. All right, there you go. All right, our Rock of Ages Ministries International, Apostle Ronnie Bailey, that's www.ronniebailey.com. I invite you to log that website into your browser. Apostle Bailey is doing some great work here, not only in the New Orleans area, but in the Lafayette area and internationally. And if you go to their website, you'll see some videos that they've traveled internationally, spreading the message. New Orleans Peacekeepers, 504-500-1706. If you know some folks that are having some difficulties, instead of fighting it out or picking up a pistol, they can call the Peacekeepers, and the Peacekeepers will come out and help resolve whatever issues they may be dealing with. We don't have this on the screen, but we want to make sure that everyone knows and that joins us in keeping in prayer those victims of the building collapse, the Hard Rock Hotel in the city of New Orleans that collapsed this week. There are several people that were killed in that collapse, in that disaster, and there were many more that were hurt. So for all of those victims, we were praying for them, for those that are still alive, praying for their speedy recovery, and for those that are deceased, we're praying that God brings peace to their families. All right. Call 311 in the New Orleans area. Call 311 between hours 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. for free smoke detectors. You know, the weather has gotten a little bit cool, and folks will be lighting up those space heaters. And, actually in the city of New Orleans now, you cannot build a house or rent a house and have space heaters in them. That's outlawed now. But if you already have your own home and have a space heater in it, whatever you can do to get rid of that space heater, those old gas space heaters, you know what I'm talking about. It causes a lot of fires. Folks now are starting to open up their stoves to try to get some heat in homes. All that can lead to fires. So if you don't have a smoke detector, go buy one. If you don't have the money to buy one, then call 311 in the New Orleans area. If you do have a smoke detector in your house, check the batteries. Okay, it does no good to have that sticking up on your ceiling just as decorations and no batteries and it's not working. So check your batteries. October, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a young lady that's been on the show for several years during this October month, sharing with us her testimony about how she is a breast cancer survivor. So we're hoping to have her on in the next couple of weeks. Please check your vehicle's backseat for babies. And, we put that on every week. We remind folks about that. And it's so sad, so heartbreaking that we had just this past week, a young baby that died because they were left in the back seat of a vehicle. So check your vehicles. Get in the habit. Just get in the habit of checking your vehicle's back seat, making sure that a child has been left there. 2020 census has jobs available. You can apply online now. That website is 2020census.gov/jobs, or you can call 1-855-562-2020. Excellent pay, flexible hours, paid training. These are temporary jobs. But if you need a little bit extra income, give the census a call. A religious spiritual study, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, coming out of the first book of Thessalonians, chapter 5, verse 21. All right, now I'm going to stop for a second now, and I'm stopping for a second. And as I said, I'm trying not to be a talking head, but for tonight, I am going to be a talking head for a good part of the show. And we're going to talk about, the canons. And canon meaning the official approved religious book. So as I was saying earlier, when you read the Old Testament, okay, and it looks like it's all one book, okay, the Old Testament, see, going all the way from Genesis to, let's see, what's the last book in the Old Testament? Okay, I don't know. I'm going to look in here in the index, and I'll be able to tell. Okay, so the Old Testament, the version that I have here, it has the first book in the Old Testament is the book of Genesis. The last book is Malachi, right? So Genesis and Malachi. Some folks might pick up this book and say, oh, the Old Testament, and think that that's all one book. No, it wasn't. Okay? No, it wasn't. So it was a process. It was a process over centuries, going over a period of hundreds of years before the Hebrew people decided which books were going to be in the Old Testament. The same way with the New Testament. It was a process of hundreds of years before the Christians got together to decide which were going to be the official books of the New Testament. And let me share something with you now. All Christians don't agree on what are the official books that belong in the New Testament. There are certain groups of Christians that have one canon, another group that have another canon, that has another canon. One of the major groups that has a different canon, and that's going to be the Catholics. And if you open up the Catholic Bible, the New Testament, you'll find books in there that are not in the New Testament in the Protestant Bible. So if you open up the Catholic Bible, they'll have books that are in there that are not in the King James Version of the New Testament. Sister Carolyn, thank you for joining us on Facebook. And hopefully I'll share, Sister Carolyn, a little bit of information about how these books were selected. And Sister Carolyn, I invite you, if you have some information that you want to share with us, please share that, post that on Facebook. All right, let's see. Okay, so I said I'm going to read some stuff off, and it's quite a few pages. I'm going to try to be brief with it. because after reading this and about that process, I'm going to read some things, or we're going to read some things. We're going to have some stuff on the screen relating to the book of Enoch. Okay, the book of Enoch. All right, so let me read through this. The rabbinic Judaism recognizes the 24 books of the Masoretic text, commonly called the Tanakh, or Hebrew Bible, as authoritative, and it consists of 24 books. Okay, so the Hebrew canon, the official Hebrew Bible, 24 books in that. The Talmud holds that the Torah, and the Torah, that's the first 5 books in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, sometimes they're called the Pentateuch, sometimes they're called the 5 books of Moses. But the first 5 books, some Hebrew scholars say that they were written by Moses. All right, and according to Jewish tradition, the Torah was recompiled by Ezra, okay, the prophet Ezra, during the Second Temple period. The final Torah is widely seen as a product of the Persian period, and that's between the years 539 BCE to 333 BCE, most likely 450 to 350 BCE. According to the Talmud, much of the Tanakh was compiled by the men of the Great Assembly, a task completed in 450 BCE, and remember BCE means before Christian era, and it has remained unchanged ever since. Okay, now this is what I'm talking about. You know, I said it wasn't one book written at one time. It was a bunch of different books, and over hundreds of years, the church leaders made decisions as to which ones were going to be part of the official script, or the official scripture. Okay? So it was church leaders over a period of hundreds of years. See, there were a whole bunch of different books floating around, a bunch of different stories. Now that's important for me to stop there. When I say books, before they got to be books, before they were written, they were in the oral, they were stories. So it was a whole bunch of stories that were floating around, a whole bunch of stories being passed around. And at some point in time, those stories were written, and they became books, different books, little short books. So you had a bunch of these little short books floating around. And the Christian leaders, not only Christian leaders, but religious leaders, some of them would have this little short book, that little short book, the other little short book, and they'd be preaching and teaching from those little short books. And then you go 200 miles away, this other religious leader had a different set of little short books. So the religious leaders got to the point where they said, well, hold on, we're going to form an association. Okay, we're going to call ourselves followers of Abraham. Okay, so we are followers of Abraham. We are Hebrews. And we are teaching our people that this is the history of our people. And we're using these little short books not only to teach the history of our people, but to teach our people about the greatness of God. So I have this little short book here talking about God. I have this other little short book talking about God. You have a different short book. So you teaching your people from a different book than mine. It might be confusing. Well, maybe, just maybe, it might be better if we came to some kind of agreement as to which short books we were going to use. So when I teach my people, you'd be teaching your people the same thing. So that's how the canonized books came about. Okay? The church leaders decided which ones were going to be official and which ones were not going to be official. So now this is what we're reading about. We're reading about the Great Assembly. And remember, now this is BCE. This is before Christ. So we're not talking about the Christian Bible right now. We're talking about the Hebrew Bible. All right? The Great Assembly, also known as the Great Synagogue, was, according to Jewish tradition, an assembly of 120 scribes, sages, and prophets in a period from the end of the biblical prophets to the time of the development of rabbinic Judaism, marking a transition, understand this, marking a transition from an era of prophets to an era of rabbis. Big distinction there. Prophets to rabbis. They lived in a period of about 2 centuries, ending in 70 A.D. In A.D., after death, okay, during the Christian era, among the developments in Judaism that are attributed to them are the fixing of the Jewish biblical canon. Right? So the fixing of the official Jewish biblical canon. Right? The early church used the Old Testament. Now this is coming out of the Jewish canon. Now we're starting to talk about Christianity and the Christian canon. The early church used the Old Testament. Now remember something. When we talk about the Old Testament, now we're talking about that official Jewish canon. Remember? Remember, the predominant religion in that area was Judaism. Jesus Christ was a Jew. Okay? Jesus Christ studied out of the official Jewish canon. They didn't have any New Testament then. Jesus didn't know anything about the New Testament. He didn't read no New Testament. It didn't exist. So when Jesus was preaching and teaching, the text that he used, the materials that he used, was the official Jewish canon. Now I'm going to share something with you now. Not only did he use the official Jewish canon, but there were some of those other little books that was floating around. Some of those other stories that Jesus used that never made it into the official Jewish canon. And we're going to read about one of them. We talked about it a little bit last week. We'll talk about it this week. The book of Enoch. One of those little books, one of those stories that was floating around but didn't make the cut into the official Jewish canon. But as I said, the early Christian church used the Old Testament. See? Because you got to get some understanding now. The New Testament, the book that we say Christians use, okay, that New Testament, it didn't exist when the apostles were walking on this earth. It didn't exist. It just did not exist. Okay? You couldn't have a book telling about what Jesus did until after Jesus was born in here. You understand that? Doesn't that make sense? Because when you read the New Testament reads about, and it tells us about Christ's birth and the things that Christ preached about and the things that he taught. That's the first 4 books of the New Testament. And then the other books after that, those are the books of the apostles. And those books weren't written when Jesus Christ was walking on the earth. Okay? So the materials that Jesus and his disciples were reading about and teaching and preaching about, that was the Old Testament and some of them other little books that was floating around that didn't make it into the official Old Testament. So it says here that the early church used the Old Testament. The apostles did not otherwise leave a defined set of new scriptures. Instead, the New Testament developed over time. Now, to some folks, that might be shocking. That all those books that we read in the New Testament, that they developed over time. But that's the reality of it. When you do your research, you find out that is the reality. Okay, Messenger Ryan, coming out of Lafayette, thank you for joining us on Facebook. All right, and I want to remind everybody that it'll be this Thursday, that they'll be broadcasting live out of Facebook, and it's at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, coming out of Lafayette on Facebook, and you can go to The Messenger. That's the Facebook page, The Messenger, and that's the society chapter in Lafayette, okay, and headed up by Messenger Ryan King, and they're coming up. This is the first and third Saturday. The first and third Sunday of every month, and this week, this coming Sunday, I think their discussion topic is going to be the Metu Netter, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's going to be the discussion topic this coming Sunday. So if you know anything about it, or if you want to know more about it, tune in. And again, the Facebook page is The Messenger. Okay, The Messenger. Okay, and when you go to that, there might be 2 or 3 different. If you do a search on Facebook, it might be 2 or 3 different ones. But when you pull up the website for the society, you'll see our logo up there, and it's The Messenger, a big blue symbol. All right, so let me go because time is kind of passing here, but I'm going to run through this. Okay, I'm going to run through this. All right, 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Thank you, Messenger King. 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Go to the Messenger Facebook page, and you can catch them live. And they encourage you to get involved with their discussion. And it's a lively group out there. They're doing some good things, getting organized out there and sharing some information, sharing some knowledge, different points of view, different opinions. It's some great work that they're doing. I encourage you to check them out. Brother Martin, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Well, let me read through this. I got to run. But Marcion of Sinope was the first Christian leader in recorded history to propose and delineate a uniquely Christian canon. This included 10 epistles from St. Paul, as well as a version of the Gospel of Luke, which today is known as the Gospel of Marcion. After Marcion, Christians began to divide texts into those that aligned well with the canon of accepted theological thought and those that promoted heresy. This played a major role in finalizing the structure of the collection of works called the Bible. You see what it says there? The collection of works. Now, a lot of what I'm reading now comes straight out of Wikipedia, but there are some other sources. Everything that I'm reading here right now, I do most of my research now is done coming off the internet. Back in the day when we first started, I used to have to go to the library, and sit down in the library and hunt books down and all the rest of that. It's so easy nowadays. With Thessalonians say, prove all things, hold fast. It's so easy nowadays. So just sit down in your house, okay? Search the web. Instead of searching for all them different memes and all these jokes and all the rest of that, sometimes some of us like to search for some knowledge, okay? Search for some knowledge relating to spiritual things and religious things. So again, so easy to do your own research. In his Easter letter of 367, Patriarch Athanasius of Alexandria gave a list of exactly the same books that would become the New Testament, 27-book proto-canon, and used the phrase being canonized in regard to them. Athanasius also included the book of Baruch, as well as the letter of Jeremiah in his Old Testament canon. However, from this canon, he omitted the book of Esther. The Eastern churches had in general a weaker feeling than those in the West for the necessity of making sharp delineations with regard to the canon. They were more conscious of the gradation of spiritual quality among the books that they accepted. And I'm going to skip some of this. The first council that accepted the present Catholic canon, and that's the Canon of Trent 1546, may have been a synod of Hippo Regius held in North Africa in 393. Now, isn't that something? Held in North Africa. Okay, it's not saying Europe, in North Africa. So this canon governing the Catholic Church, North Africa, makes you scratch your head a little bit. A brief summary of the Acts was read at and accepted by the Council of Carthage and also the Council of Carthage of 419. These councils took place under the authority of St. Augustine, who regarded the canon as already closed. Okay? So now, I've said over hundreds of years, so we're looking at 1546 AD, 354 AD, 430 AD. Hundreds of years it took. Hundreds of years before there was some kind of, Brother Eves, thank you for joining us. Sister Rafud, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Over hundreds of years before there were canons developed. Because as I said earlier, even today, in the year 2019, there are various segments of Christianity that accept certain books as being official and certain other ones not being official. And you just heard me say earlier that if you open up a Catholic Bible, you'll see different books in the Catholic Bible than if you open up the King James Version of the Bible. Okay, so different official books. All right. As the canon crystallized, non-canonical texts fell into relative disfavor and neglect. Okay, Martin Luther, okay, the year 1483 to 1546, moved 7 Old Testament books into a section he called the Apocrypha. So now when you hear folks talk about the Apocrypha, and look at these 7 books: Tobit, Judith, 1 and 2 Maccabees, Book of Wisdom, Sirach, and Baruch. And he called them Apocrypha. To refer to these books without calling them Apocrypha, Catholic and Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox later referred to them as the Deuterocanonicals. Okay? The Deuterocanonicals, while still accepting their full canonicity. Right? So here we see different segments of the Christian religion having different official books, okay, different canons. All right, it's starting to get kind of late, and that's one of the things that I run into on this show, and that's trying to fit too much information into a short period of time. We talk about an hour, having an hour period of time, but when you're trying to see what we're talking about tonight, there are college courses that last several semesters. I didn't say several weeks. I said several semesters studying these topics. And actually, there are scholars, religious scholars, theologians, that spend lifetimes studying these topics. So all I'm doing tonight is giving you a taste, an introduction, some of you, an introduction into this information. Okay? And some of you will want to delve into a little bit further, because some of you, when you're sitting down in your church on Sunday and you're reading the first epistle of Paul, or you're reading the Acts of the Apostles, when you're reading that, you might start wondering where this came from. Where this came from. But let me move on, because there are some things I want to get to, and that I want to really get to right now, and that's the book of Enoch. And I want to get to the book of Enoch because we were talking and studying past couple of weeks some of the things in the Bible, and where the Bible talks about giants. Okay, in the book of Genesis, it talks about giants, the sons of God, and we're trying to discuss, well, who are the sons of God? What are they talking about, sons of God? He said, sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. All right, and they took wives of them, had babies with them, and those babies were giants in the earth. Okay? And then we were trying to figure out, well, let's learn some more about that. And one of the things that we discussed and we came up with, well, look, there are some of these other little books that was floating around out there that talked about that same thing. And one of those little books that was floating around but didn't make the cut to be one of the official books, even though some of the official books talk about this little book that didn't make the cut, didn't make the team, even though some of the books that did make the team talks about it, it wasn't included. And that little book was the book of Enoch. So we're going to go right in right now and read some excerpts out of the book of Enoch. And all right, so we've talked about the Apocrypha, so that was our introduction, okay, the Apocrypha, how it developed. So there were some of these little books that some official canon included them, some didn't. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the book of Enoch. Now look, what you see on your screen right now, okay, what you see on your screen now, that's an excerpt. And the first part comes out of the book of Matthew, okay? Matthew, and I'm opening up my book as I talk right now. I'm opening up my book. Matthew, it says Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, okay? Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, I'm using the King James Version, and it says here, Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Okay? That's what it says, King James Version. Matthew 5, 5. Now the next thing that you see on your screen says, the elect shall possess light, joy, and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. Now that's coming out of the book of Enoch. Okay, the book of Enoch. And for those of you that want to do your own research, okay, Sister Evangelist, all right, Evangelist Peterson, thank you for joining us on Facebook. And for those of you that we're going to have the evangelist on the show in the next couple of weeks. She's a very, very powerful lady. She's been on the show in the past, and she's got some information that she's going to share with us in about 2 weeks here on the message. But if you see what it says there, the elect shall possess light, joy, and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. Very, very similar sentiment coming out of the book of Matthew as expressed in the book of Enoch. Now, for those of you that want to do your own research, you can find text of the book of Enoch, and our website is www.book-of-enoch.com. Okay? www.book-of-enoch.com. And you can look it up there, and it has it broken down by chapter and verse. Go there, chapter, and the one that's in the parentheses there, that's 6:9. That's the actual reference. So we see some similarities there between what's in the Bible and what's in the book of Enoch. A couple of more. The Father judgeth no man, but had committed all judgment unto the Son. Coming out of the book of John, chapter 5, verse 22. Now we read in the book of Enoch, the principal part of the judgment was assigned to him, the Son of Man. Okay? Very, very similar. Very, very similar sentiment. All right? The next one. Woe unto you that are rich, for ye have received your consolation. Coming out of Luke, chapter 6, verse 24. Now we turn to the book of Enoch. Woe to you who are rich, for in your riches have you trusted, but from your riches you shall be removed. Let's see if we have another one. The water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water, spring up into everlasting life. Coming out of the book of John, chapter 4, verse 14. All the thirsty drank and were filled with wisdom, having their habitation with the righteous, the elect, and the holy. Coming out of the book of Enoch. All right, now this is the book of Enoch, and that's why I was trying to rushing, because I'm going to just read, and I know it's kind of small, but that's the best I could do for right now. All right, coming out of chapter 7 in the book of Enoch, Verse 1. It happened after the sons of men had multiplied in those days. Now, doesn't this sound just like what we read in the book of Genesis? It happened after the sons of men had multiplied in those days, that the daughters were born to them, elegant and beautiful. The sons of God saw the daughters of men. That's the way the Bible puts it. Saw they were fair. All right, now verse 2. And when the angels, now check this out. And when the angels, the sons of heaven, beheld them, they became enamored of them, saying to each other, Come, let us select for ourselves wives from the progeny of men. All right? Now, while that's on the screen, I'm looking, and I think that comes out of Genesis chapter 5. Let me see. Because there's, all right. Let's see. No, it's not 5. Chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. All right. So Genesis chapter 6, it says, And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God. Now here in the Bible it calls them the sons of God. In the book of Enoch, it says the angels. Okay, the sons of heaven. All right. All right. Now look. I'm not going to keep going back and forth like that. Let me finish reading because the time is getting short. Let me finish reading about this. You know, and that time flies just like birds. Just like a bird flying away, that time is flying. You know, and when the time goes to flying and you got something you're trying to do, you know, again, it might make you say, you know, just trying to hold on a little bit, but you got to go ahead on. So look what it says. And when now we're going to read. I'm going to read. And when the angels, the sons of heaven, beheld them, they became enamored of them, saying to each other, Come, let us select for ourselves wives from the progeny of men, and let us beget children. So now here are angels, talking about angels up in heaven, looking down on earth and seeing the women and saying, Look, them women are fine. You know, they're fine. And they went and made babies with them. Now look at in verse 3. And you know, sometimes we read about the fallen angels. Well, hold on now. The fallen angels. Man, I wonder if this is the same thing. If that's where that story comes from about the fallen angels. Then their leader, Semyaza, all right, and I might be mispronouncing that, said to them, I fear that you may perhaps be indisposed to the performance of this enterprise. I like that way they say that you may perhaps be indisposed. Man, that kind of talking like that. You may perhaps be indisposed to the performance of this enterprise. All that double talk. All right? And I alone shall suffer for so grievous a crime. But they answered him and said, We all swear. So Samaja was saying, Look, y'all might not want to own up to what y'all doing, and I'll be the only one that get the charge. You know? And his buddy said, Oh, no, we all swear and bind ourselves by mutual execrations, that we will not change our intention, but execute our projected undertaking. Man, we're going to do it with you, man. You ain't got to worry about us backing out. We're going to be with you. We got your back. We like them women too. We going to get some of them women our own selves. All right? Yeah, I just try to interpret that a little bit. Then they swore all together and all bound themselves by mutual execrations. Their whole number was 200. Who descended upon Ardis, which is the top of Mount Orman. Now, you see, if you descending, that means you going down. And they're saying they descended to the top of a mountain. So that means wherever it was on above the top of a mountain. So it said that they were the sons of heaven. So they were in heaven. These angels in heaven looked down and saw them women. Them women were fine. And they said, we're going to get some of that. But now, one angel said, hey, y'all going to try to have me stand out there by myself. And then his friends say, oh, no, we with you, man. We swear we're going to do the same thing. All right, so there 200 of them. 200 of them came down. All right, that mountain, therefore, was called Orman because they had sworn upon it and bound themselves by mutual execrations. I'm going to have to look that word up, execrations. I like that word. I'm going to use that word sometime, execrations. These are the names of their chiefs. Semyaza, who was their leader, Yerakabonamiel, man, Akabil, Tamiel, Ramuel, Danel, Askil, Sarachniel, They talk about black folks having some names. Man, look at these names. Armors, well, maybe they're the black, maybe they got names. Armors, Batrel, Anani, Zavibi, Samsavil, Ertel, Tirel, Yomiel, Arizal. These were the prefects of the 200 angels, and the remainder were all with them. They were going to have themselves a party. Okay, they were going to have a party. All right, let's go on. Then they took wives, each choosing for himself whom they began to approach, and with whom they cohabitated. They lived with them. Then they had sex with them, making babies. Wait a minute. Look at this little part right here. Teaching them sorcery, incantations, and the dividing of roots and trees. Teaching them sorcery, incantations, and dividing. See, this book of Enoch, that's one of them little books that was floating around there. All right? That was floating around there. In the official books of the Bible now, we see references to the book of Enoch. And in the official Bible, we see him talking about these sorcery and incantations. And now here it is in the book of Enoch, we're reading about how these angels came down from heaven having sex with these women and gave them a little something, not $40, but gave them sorcery, incantation, and the dividing of roots and trees. And the women conceiving brought forth giants. Look at that, brought forth giants. I told you that. That's what it says in there. Now, this is the kind of stuff that the early Christians was reading, okay? Early Christians was reading that. Whose stature was each 300 cubits. These devoured all which the labor of men produced until it became impossible to feed them. When they turned themselves against men in order to devour them and began to injure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fishes, to eat their flesh one after another, and to drink their blood. Then the earth reproved the unrighteous. Okay? Now, if that interested you, if you want to learn more about this, read more about this, this is what I told you earlier. Look on your screen. It says www.book-of-enoch.com. Okay? Go do your research. Now, see, this is one of the things when we read in the scriptures, it talks about the official scriptures, okay? The official scriptures, and this is coming out again, Book of Genesis, chapter 6. It has a very, very, very similar story about the sons of God and the daughters of men. And look what it says in chapter 6, verse 3. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, and yet his days shall be 120 years. And there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Look at that. Now look at this part here. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And he repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and a creeping thing and a fowl there, for he repented me that I have made them. Okay? Now that right there, okay, that gives a little background of the story. All right? That gives a little bit background of the story. And when we read in the official Bible, we read that story about the sons of God seeing the daughters of men. Okay? For number one, that opens up the question, well, sons of God, God had more than one son? Okay? Man, that opens that question. God had more than one son. And now we can see that some of those other little books that was floating around got into a little bit more detail about those sons of God, that these were angels. See, and when we, wait a minute, get some understanding now.